This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
Friends, we're at that point where we're going to maybe need to do two-a-days when it comes to this show. The developing news, particularly on that front, the United States and Venezuela. But then the spin-off, the spill-out from that means that a very dynamic story. The details change every hour. Grateful to have you here with us in our first episode of 2026. If you caught it on the 5th of January, Supriya Dwivedi joined us as we processed the United States rolling in, pulling Venezuela's longtime dictator, Nicolas Maduro, out of bed and dragging him to New York to face charges, as you know, appearing before a lower Manhattan judge as we were recording that episode. Well, conversations are continuing as Trump and other White House officials continue to comment on their plans for the near future, including Greenland in their sights. Remarkable interview with Jake Tapper on CNN and Stephen Miller, the White House Deputy Chief of Staff. We're going to get to that in a bit. I want to ask Rahim Mohamed about that from the National Post. Canada's recently retired ambassador to the United Nations, Bob Rae, commenting on the idea around the United States with eyes on and perhaps aim on countries including Mexico and Colombia, and as we discussed with Supriya yesterday, maybe even Canada. Some of you, listeners to this show, we sure appreciate you have written in and told us that we're fear-mongering, asking whether or not Canadians should be concerned about this new Trump trend. We'll put that to you, those that are watching us as we do this show live in our live chat powered by Park Power. We'll get to what you have to say. I'm curious to know what Rahim Mohamed has to say about that. And of course, you can always send us emails to talk@ryanjesperson.com. If you're a regular viewer of Real Talk, you probably also remember an interview we did with a former fire tower lookout, Trina Moyles, had one of those jobs that you just kind of wonder, gosh, what would that be like out in the boreal forest in those isolated towers, those fire lookout towers, the relationships that she forged, the understanding that she gleaned around wildlife, including bears. Well, Trina was talking to us about fire last time she was on the show, letting us know she was writing a book about bears. And we're thrilled to let you know that today, on the 6th of January, it is officially release day of Black Bear, Trina's new book. Now, her publisher sent us an advance copy of it, and as I was reading it, I quickly realized that this book is about a whole lot more than just coexisting with bears. It's about family. It's about understanding the world around us. It's about understanding where some of the threats to humanity truly lie. It's the conversations around industry and the environment. And Trina is going to join us right here in our studio in the historic Mercer Warehouse in downtown Edmonton to talk about the process of writing the book. And I guarantee, whether you're a bear biologist or a pipeliner, an average Albertan, or somebody watching from somewhere else around the world, you're going to learn something today from Trina Moyles. Very much looking forward to that. This episode is happening with the presenting sponsorship of our friends at Hanson Distillery. Not going to lie to you, Johnny, there's not much left of our bottles of mint chocolate cream liqueur and the gingerbread cookie cream liqueur. Both of those helped us thoroughly and truly enjoy our holiday season. Hanson does that like nobody else, and you can read about those seasonal releases at hansondistillery.com. On our table today in studio, we've got a bottle of their Northern Eyes whiskey, and this is one that I know the team's really proud of. They have their 5-year aged whiskey and a very limited edition 7-year aged whiskey, the first ever distilled and released in Edmonton. So it's a big deal, and we're thrilled for our friends at Hanson Distillery. Whether you're sipping something sweet, maybe even gifting a bottle that actually gets remembered through this year, keep the Northern Eyes whiskey from Hanson Distillery in mind. You can always find them online. You can find them if you're in the Metro Edmonton region. A beautiful location, that distillery just north of Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West on 174th Street, 111th Avenue. You can always find Hanson Distillery products, wherever fine spirits are sold. Hanson is proudly local, always original, made right here. I don't know what it's been like for the intrepid producer of this show when we're talking about what we'll be getting to next, and we're sending you video clips. I'm saying, Johnny, please pull this. Please grab that. Interviews that are happening around Venezuela. In particular, we're about to hear about Greenland. If you're like me, are you running a few of these through the AI filters to try to figure out if life is actually real?
I am, but you have to be careful with AI these days, including like even stats now. I go to just simple stat I need from AI. You ask it one time of the day, and then another time of the day it gives you different readings. But it loves to give opinions. Like remember when I played you my AI assistant the other day with the whole voice and attitude?
He was
like
wishing you a good morning.
Ask it how it feels about Trump going into Venezuela. Ask it and listen to what it says. It's quite fascinating.
Yeah. So now the Danes are speaking out about the Americans' intention, or perhaps their implied or maybe assumed intentions around Greenmark. The president of the United States says that they're going to need, but so the Danes are kind of in charge of the whole thing right now. Greenland is theirs. As far as history is concerned. But Stephen Miller, Deputy Chief of Staff at the White House, a senior Trump official, of course, and a longtime advisor of Donald Trump, is arguing that the president has long had aims on Greenland. The president has long argued that Greenland should be under the control of the United States, and so that ostensibly justifies the position that the United States is taking, or at least the comments that the president's been making about it, right?
And as Supriya said yesterday, it probably has a lot to do with that Northwest Passage.
Right? That was an interesting angle that she brought up when we were talking about Venezuela and international agreements and threats to Canada and the whole nine yards. You can check out that episode with Supriya, our most recent. That's January 5th in our archive. So, of course, when Jake Tapper from CNN gets the interview with Stephen Miller, he's going to ask about Greenland. And it gets a little bit personal for Miller, whose wife, Katie, had just posted a photo of Greenland. You're about to hear about it, with the American stars and stripes over it. And that's where the conversation gets particularly interesting. Before we get to Rahim from the National Post, let's set the table.
Important topic. The Premier of Greenland and the Premier of Denmark and other Danish officials are responding to a Twitter post from your wife, Katie Miller, herself a former Trump White House official, showing Greenland covered with an American flag, saying soon. After that was posted, President Trump repeated the claim that the U.S. needs Greenland for national security reasons. The Danish Prime Minister responded to this in an interview earlier today, as reported by Bloomberg, quote, "I believe one should take the American president seriously when he says it wants Greenland, but I will also make it clear that if the U.S. chooses to attack another NATO country militarily, then everything stops, including NATO, and thus the security that has been established since the end of the Second World War." Can you rule out that the U.S. is ever going to try to take Greenland by force?
Well, let me go back a step. The president has been clear for months now, so I know you're treating this as breaking news. The president has been clear for months now that the United States should be the nation that has Greenland as part of our overall security apparatus. The United States,
but your wife posted that like hours after the Venezuela operation.
No, but
that's why it's newly relevant.
No, I'll talk with you about it for an hour. I think it's a really important conversation. I just wanted to reset, Jake, by making clear that it has been the formal position of the U.S. government since the beginning of this administration, frankly, going back into the previous Trump administration, that Greenland should be part of the United States. The president has been very clear about that. That is the formal position of the U.S. government.
Right, but can you say that military action against Greenland is off the table?
It wouldn't be military action against Greenland. The Greenland has a population of 30,000 people, Jake. The real question is, by what right does Denmark assert control over Greenland? What is the basis of their territorial claim? What is their basis of having Greenland as a colony of Denmark? The United States is the power of NATO. For the United States to secure the Arctic region, to protect and defend NATO and NATO interests, obviously Greenland should be part of the United States. And so that's a conversation that we're going to have as a country. That's a process we're going to have as a community of nations.
So you can't take it off the table that the U.S. would use military force to seize Greenland. You can't take it off the table.
Jake, I understand you're trying very hard to, which again, is your job. I respect it. It's great to get exactly the headline, right? That catchy headline.
I'm trying to get an answer to the question.
That says Miller refuses to rule out. The United States should have Greenland as part of the United States. there's no need to even think or talk about this in the context that you're asking of a military operation. Nobody's going to fight the United States militarily over the future of Greenland.
One last question,
doesn't
Stephen.
make any sense.
Nobody's going to fight the United States over Greenland. Now, Cactus Sheriff is not wrong. In our live chat, powered by Park Power, says it's not just the Danes that are pushing back on this. Says, what about that joint letter from a number of leaders in the European Union? And that's true. Just hours before we're doing this show, leaders from major European powers rallied behind Greenland, saying in a joint statement that the Arctic belongs to its people, following this renewed interest from the United States. Leaders of France, Britain, Germany, Italy, Poland, Spain, and Denmark. A joint statement, quote, Greenland belongs to its people. It is for Denmark and Greenland and them only to decide on matters concerning Denmark and Greenland. Everybody's got thoughts on these across the spectrum. I've been looking forward to picking the brain of Rahim Mohamed, longtime friend of the show, national columnist for the National Post. Thanks for making time for us this morning, and a happy new year to you, Rahim. Where is your head at on this?
Ryan, and happy Justin Trudeau Resignation Day to all those who celebrate.
Is that on January 6th? That's the anniversary you're marking on January 6th?
It's an important date on both sides of the border.
I guess. Yeah. How are you wrapping your mind around what we're seeing here right now? Erica in our chat right now said, wait, there are still people that think that this is real life. It just feels bizarre.
Well, I have it on good authority that Mark Carney's already shaken hands with the Prime Minister of Denmark. The two of them met up in Paris, as part of this discussion of a possible Russian peace deal to end the war in Ukraine. And there was just a readout from about half an hour ago from the Prime Minister's office that Prime Minister Carney had met with the Prime Minister of Denmark. The two were actively discussing this situation. So you do already have a rapid response. I guess Canada is part of this group of Arctic/Nordic nations that ought to be concerned with what's going on. So Mark Carney was quite quick on the draw to make that connection.
Retired ambassador to the United Nations, Bob Ray, had something to say about this a short time ago. I wanted to put this. I mean, we're always looking for the Canadian perspective, the Canadian angle on the stories. I'll get your take on what former Ambassador Ray had to say, but here's a portion of it.
If one regional power says, well, here's my doctrine and this is what we're going to do, what stops the other regional powers from saying exactly the same thing?
Right.
I mean, the Russians and the Chinese will use the Security Council to condemn what the Americans to do. But you know what I think? I think that privately they're just rubbing their hands because they know perfectly well that the Americans will have no case to make against the way in which they have acted, against their acting. They'll have no argument. They've lost any sense of legality that would justify saying this is why we're doing what we're doing. And I think that it's not just what's being done; it's the way things are being done that ultimately is unsustainable. And that, I think, is, if this isn't part of the conversation among Western governments meeting in Paris privately, if not publicly, I'd be very disappointed because we do have to wake up. This is not business as normal, and this is not politics as usual. You don't go around threatening peaceful countries like Denmark and Greenland. You don't go around threatening your neighbors like Mexico. You don't typically go around threatening sovereign nations. You don't typically go around threatening your neighbors. Different world. I mean, forever. And I'm just on the way things have always been done, but they done differently now.
So I'm not saying Mrs. Miller or President Trump. The fact of the matter is this concerns NATO. NATO was created by the United States for the benefit of the United States. Following World War II, the United States said it would be preferable to subsidize national security on the European continent to create a united military alliance. That would be preferable to having to go back to Europe 20 or 30 years time in the World War. The fact of the matter is we have these multilateral defense arrangements for a reason. They were created by the United States at the start of the United States World Order. It benefited the United States more anyone else to with people with his administration fixing for a anarchy where the United States is free to make for Greenland and Russia, to plant a flag in Pole, China is free to make any sort of land graph in the area. That's something we're really fixing. If we are any sort of intervention in Greenland, I think would create an irreparable rupture. It was united.
So we had, like I mentioned, we had some feedback. It wasn't consensus feedback, but following our conversation yesterday about applications for Canada, folks in the Canada-US relationship is completely different. Canada is different. Mexico is different. Colombia, Venezuela, Finland. You as a Canadian have concern what could for our country?
Well, I would say it brings conversation. Looking at the apprehension from now is trying to do business with that to try and take our full on I do think part of the appeal for Trump, particularly among the 20, 30-something young men, is, okay, we might not love everything he does, but at least not Chinese in the area. So any kind of led to the United States, I see I have a very difficult time imagining that not ending up with American lives at risk and large scale forever. That part spread with military peace and forever wars in and Iraq.
So, where do you go from here? You talk about what Mark Carney's got on the docket this week, and obviously Canada's kind of sandwiched in an interesting position. You're not just geographically, also the fact that CUSMA is being renegotiated as we speak. That's something that Canadians I know. If you're advising the Prime Minister, what's Canada's best play in all of this right now? Every word, although I'll acknowledge, as I'm about to say, every word matters. It also feels like the President of the United States kind of changes his tone, changes his perspective, changes his focus, maybe changes his priorities on a daily or weekly basis. So kind of a moving target.
So I mean, I think the show of strength and making the connection right away, and having the public show of support right away for the Prime Minister of Denmark. What solid start? Immediately focused on the other Nordic countries. So places like Sweden, Finland. I know Sweden just made a massive charm offensive toward Canada in support of selling its fighter jets to Canada. And I think if we continue to have this sort of expansionist posturing from the United States, we need to seriously consider, kind of voting with our dollars and instead of purchasing military hardware from the United States, let's look at what Sweden has on offer. Let's look at what Denmark has on offer. And I think potentially dollars and sort of transactions and actions might matter at this point more than words.
Rahim, we will disclose now to the audience at this point in this interview that we originally booked you to talk about Alberta's separation, but we had to get your take on Greenland.
Been flying by the seat of my pants. I know Iceland has a great hockey team from the Mighty Ducks too. Know nothing, next to nothing about Greenland. It's a pain in the ass to hold and risk. That's about the best Best I have.
You know, I've never.
Although in risk, it's in North America, not Europe. So maybe maybe Trump is using that as as his guidelines.
I full disclosure, any risk reference is totally lost on me, and I apologize for that. But I think everybody's leveling up their understanding or their awareness or their knowledge of Greenland. To be fair,
and I don't want to be one of those Twitter guys that's an expert on Venezuela one day and then an expert on Greenland the next day. You see a lot of that,
which is why I'm curious to pick your brain on Canadian politics, because that is what you cover on a day-to-day basis for the National Post. For those that weren't tuned in to our most recent episode on the 5th of January, I'll tee this up again. One of Alberta's more prominent separatists, one of the founders of the Alberta Prosperity Project, he's a lawyer, Jeff Rath, did an interview with Rachel Parker a while ago over the holiday break, where he talked about and confirmed essentially, or at least let me say claimed, that Alberta independence meetings are happening with the U.S. State Department. It was posted about online, talking about these negotiations, the Americans viewing a free and independent Alberta as aligned with national security interests, talking about negotiating U.S. recognition of an independent Alberta, a West Coast pipeline route via the states, a $500 billion, a $500 billion line of credit for the transition, Alberta out of Canada. I mean, the list goes on. I'll remind people, Mr. Rath is unelected. He's unappointed. The party is not recognized as a legitimate political party. I mean, in layperson's terms, this guy has no business meeting with the U.S. State Department and negotiating on behalf of Alberta or Albertans. And so in somewhat cheeky fashion, on Boxing Day, I tweeted, in a lot of countries, this tomfoolery would get you strung up for treason. And, well, it lit a forest fire, so to speak, including from Mr. Rath, who has been protesting my choice of words ever since. But it prompted you to actually do a bit of journalism, which you published at nationalpost.com. You looked into whether or not it's actually, by definition, treason for Alberta separatists to maneuver with foreign officials. Take us into it.
Sure. Well, first of all, I got to thank you. The week between Christmas and New Year's is always a bit of a dead zone. So that tweet on Boxing Day was a gift and gave me an opportunity to do this sort of deep dive. Like a lot of people, I kind of look at these things. I tend to through the realm of American popular culture. So I talk about things like my First Amendment rights. I shouldn't. I talk about things like the Second Amendment. I always assumed we had something along the lines of what's called the Logan Act of 1799 in the U.S., which basically prohibits any private citizen who's not a government official from any sort of unauthorized diplomatic contact with a foreign government. So the Logan Act, it's rarely been invoked, but it comes up every time you have, Dennis Rodman going to North Korea to play basketball with Kim Jong-un or whatever C or D list celebrity gets received at the Kremlin by Vladimir Putin. I always assumed Canada had something like that. It turns out we don't. So I quickly emailed both the Global Affairs Canada and the Department of Justice. I got a response right away from Global Affairs that said the short answer is we don't have any Logan Act. And also when these conversations do take place, so private citizens meeting with U.S. government officials, if you take Mr. Rath at his word, there's no need to check in ahead of time with Global Affairs Canada or any other government agency. So the Department of Justice got back to me later with boilerplate about a recently passed foreign interference bill and a forthcoming foreign influence registry that hasn't been created yet. It's to be managed by a commissioner who hasn't been appointed yet. They must read my stuff because there was just a set of draft regulations that came out on January the 3rd. That basically said if you're someone like, let's say, Chrystia Freeland, who accepts a job with the government of Ukraine, you need to communicate that to the relevant parties in Canada. You need to communicate, okay, is there a salary? What are going to be the terms of my relationship? What sorts of information am I going to be dealing with? So even under that, there'd be nothing that applies to informal talks that are being led by private individuals, unless there are some kind of U.S. organizations that are paying the Alberta Prosperity Project money or sort of footing the bill for these excursions. As far as I can tell, this is a group that's self-financed. The kind of sugar daddy is Dennis Modry, who's actually a celebrated heart surgeon here in Canada. I believe he.
I don't know about
he
celebrated.
In his prior career, I think he performed the first heart transplant in Alberta. He's a pretty, moneyed individual. So as far as I can tell, they're footing their own bill for these visits at the State Department and for these visits with U.S. officials. So there's nothing on the books per se that would prohibit these sorts of meetings.
Yeah, I think you and I will both acknowledge. And by the way, I do want to ask. I'll ask you about Chrystia Freeland, who's announced that she will resign in the coming weeks to take this job for Zelensky.
Yeah.
I'll ask you before we sign off today, but I wouldn't say, and I think you're aware of this, that I'm not legitimately, seriously suggesting that this is treason by the book, nor that anyone should be strung up. I will say that former Alberta Premier Jason Kenney has referred to the treasonous kooks that are participating
and I think
in this
the other
as well.
thing is the last thing you would ever want to do with these folks is inflame their persecution conflicts. There's nothing Jeff Rath would love more than a mugshot, more than getting arrested on suspicion of foreign interference. That would just be terrific for driving fundraising and driving the movement. So if you're Ottawa, you do have to be careful. I hope there's sort of some, they're on the radar somewhat, because a lot of it would depend on the nature of these talks, and they're behind closed doors. So if, hypothetically, and I'm not saying this is happening, but hypothetically, if they're giving the Trump government strategic details that would influence a future incursion into Canada, that's something that is clearly prohibited under national laws prohibiting sedition, treason, the sharing of sensitive information, etc. So I think a lot of it boils down to the nature of these talks, which we have to take at this point the Alberta Prosperity Project's word for. I've reached out to the State Department with a few different emails. They're obviously quite busy fielding inquiries from across the world over the past weekend, but I haven't got any sort of response on their end to confirm the nature of these sorts of talks.
I'll note, and people can check out our archives on the podcast or on our YouTube channel. We did speak with Jeff Rath, who appeared on the show last year, and I asked him, this is not the first time that they've claimed to be having these meetings with senior U.S. officials, which is how he phrased it at the time. And I asked him, who are you talking to? And he wouldn't divulge that. I agree with you on the martyr complex. I agree with you on the value for their movement of a mugshot, of that kind of persecution idea. I do think it drives fundraising. It certainly drives publicity and awareness. And I've had some well-meaning and cerebral folks reach out to me and say, man, it's kind of regrettable that you're amplifying what he's doing. I come at it differently, and I've discussed that in past. I think that it's important for Albertans that feel strongly about the province's future in Canada to speak out to that and to hold our ground, and to be very clear that this is something that we're willing to fight for as well. But I want to be clear and say that I'm not suggesting that the federal justice minister should have Jeff Rath in his sights, and this is something he should be facing charges for. I want my fellow Albertans to be paying attention to this and to be evaluating the legitimacy or the illegitimacy of what's happening, and realizing that there's a very real possibility that the province's future in Canada could go to a vote at some point in the next year, maybe within the next number of months, and something that they should be taking seriously too. I want to put a comment from Supriya Dwivedi in front of you and get your take on it. She joins us first episode of every week, presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. Supriya, former senior advisor to then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. I asked her what she thought of the whole situation of this independent, unaffiliated, unelected group claiming to meet with U.S. State Department officials. And here's what Supriya said one episode ago.
What kind of chuckleheads in the U.S. State Department are taking these meetings? Like, I got to be honest, if somebody from another country was contacting the Prime Minister's office and was saying something along the lines of, look, we're not an elected party, we have no actual power, but we're trying to stir up some shit in our home country and we'd like to meet with you, we would have said no. And the reason you said no is because you have you don't have time for that sort of stuff. And the fact that, if these meetings actually did happen with the State Department, I think it's another, knock on the Carney government, to be quite honest, for not being on top of it. Like, what kind of relationships do they have between Canada and the State Department that the State Department would even take these meetings with this group, whether it was with Jeff Rath or others that are associated with the Alberta independence movement? Like, all of it seems like amateur hour, and quite frankly, I don't think it's a good look on either of the countries.
To be honest with you, when she said it, I kind of realized that I hadn't really evaluated it in the context of the federal government and its relationship with the White House. But what do you make of what she said?
So the thing that surprised me the most in doing the research is that the lack of democratic or popular legitimacy for Alberta separatists. So they don't have any seats in the legislature. They're not elected, or they don't have any official capacity. Legally speaking, that's irrelevant. It's no more illegitimate for these ragtag Alberta separatists to go to D.C., than for Ottawa to receive the Dalai Lama and sort of bestow honorary citizenship on the Dalai Lama, who, if we're being technical, is a Tibetan separatist. And if we're being technical, is, someone advocating the breakup of a united China. So it's interesting to me that it didn't seem to matter legally as to whether this is an elected separatist premier of Quebec visiting France, or these three dudes in cowboy hats going down to the U.S. To hold these meetings with State Department officials. So one of the lawyers that I interviewed for the story put it quite succinctly, that there's no law on the books against being a crank. And I guess there's no law in the books in the U.S. Against government officials receiving cranks.
People can read your full story at nationalpost.com. You published it on the 30th of December. We're talking to Rahim Mohamed. Former Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland, former federal finance minister, has announced that she will step down, she says, in the coming weeks as the MP for Toronto's University. Rosedale will trigger a by-election, which will always make things more interesting, to take on a voluntary advisory role for Vladimir Zelensky. For a few hours yesterday, it seemed like a lot of people. You've got a bit of a you have a bit of a furrowed brow right now, and I saw that from a lot of people that were going, "Hang on a second," because she had not announced her resignation and then announced the role to advise Ukraine. It was the other way around. A lot of people were going, "Hang on a second, how does a sitting MP accept a foreign position like this?" Now, if the resignation comes and goes, she's free to move on like any other politician re-entering public service or private life. But your thoughts? I mean, she's, of course, been probably the most vocal opponent of Russian aggression in Ukraine, but your thought on how it rolled out?
Sure. So since stepping aside from cabinet, I believe she accepted a role with the entity in the United Kingdom that sponsors the Rhodes Scholarship. So she'd been making a few different moves, but obviously this is one of a different nature. And when we open the door to discussions of foreign influence, this is why it's so challenging, because it does raise questions of whataboutism. Chrystia Freeland accepting an unpaid role with Ukraine. Jamil Javani being in a fantasy football league with the vice president of the United States. You have all these kind of gray areas, but I would be shocked. I was kind of shocked at how it was communicated. I mean, you'd think you'd communicate the resignation with accepting a position with a foreign government, especially one that's in as sensitive of a geopolitical position as Ukraine is right now. So I'd be interested in knowing how it all came down and how it was communicated to the PMO, because it just came out looking like you had the kind of the cart being put before the horse, and that I'm accepting this. No, wait, I'm going to step aside in the coming weeks, and of course you have to fold this all into the discussion of the Carney government being one seat away from a majority government, and kind of openly trying to recruit people and bring people over, and openly trying to get over that hump. So you have a lot going on here, and I feel like the way it was communicated, especially for someone that's been in and around politics as long as Freeland, was quite sloppy and opened a lot of uncomfortable questions.
Are you going to be flying out to Alberta? Are you going to be here in Alberta for the Conservative Convention coming up later this
So
month?
I've got a very important ultrasound. I'm expecting my first child in June, and we have an ultrasound the weekend of January the 30th, and obviously that takes priority. I would have loved to have been in Calgary. I'm sure you'll put on a hell of a party in Alberta for the Conservative Convention, but obviously that takes priority.
Yeah. Well, congratulations, first of all. That's very exciting, of course. Are you going to find out? Are you at the stage yet where you'll have the opportunity to find out if you'll welcome a son or a daughter? And if so,
I'm going to be a girl dad. Really excited about that. That's what we both wanted. So we're in the pink already.
Attaboy.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Okay, so there's would have loved.
There's no prediction. There's no prediction to be made on boy or girl. What about on not to turn it right back to politics? I just can't help myself sometimes. Yeah. What about on Pierre Poilievre's fate through that leadership review?
So Doug Ford did him a huge solid. The Progressive Conservatives in Ontario are going to be having their convention on the same weekend. So you're not going to have Corey Tonight running around and sowing discord. A lot of the people from Ontario who would have been more skeptical of Poilievre staying aboard, they're going to be in Toronto for that. So I think he has choreographed it in a way that it sets up for a relatively smooth run in that, it's on his home turf. He's from Calgary. The people that end up showing up, I think, are going to be more rooted in Western Canada. So I would be shocked if we got anything under about 80%. I'm gonna put that as the floor. So I think the interesting thing with the Conservatives is sort of within their caucus, they have the Reform Act. The caucus can call for a review of the leader pretty much whenever they want. So it happened with Aaron O'Toole in early 2022 following a controversial vote on conversion therapy and right at the midst of the Freedom Convoy. So potentially, I expect Mr. Poilievre to get through Calgary quite comfortably, but that doesn't mean the rug can't be pulled out from under him at any time.
Yeah, do we both acknowledge that if the leadership, I guess in a way it's a bit of an irony, the leadership review goes well for Pierre Poilievre and potentially discontented MPs, those that are perhaps hoping for new leadership, for a new focus, for a fresh face to steer that party, could then consider leaving? In other words, his success through the leadership review could lead to a further challenge and maybe even a majority government for the Liberals. You see what I'm saying here?
I think that the upcoming by-election in University Rosedale, I think that's going to be a pretty safe Liberal seat, but it complicates things. You also have a number of, I guess, Justin Trudeau loyalists who've communicated that there's one foot out the door. So people like Bill Blair, Stephen Guilbeault, there will likely be a number of by-elections in kind of the early to middle part of this year, which I think for the most part are in safe Liberal areas. But it does complicate this story of, kind of the Carney government wooing these disaffected Conservatives. And I would say, you've had caucus management be a bit of an issue on both sides. You have a lot of people, kind of more that environmentalist wing that weren't thrilled with the memorandum of understanding with Alberta, that haven't been thrilled at how Carney has dealt with environmental and climate issues. So I think caucus management is a challenge for both Mr. Carney and Mr. Poilievre, and the by-elections will maybe put something of a kibosh on this discussion about Carney getting to a minority by coaxing over Conservative MPs, and they're going to be more of the focus heading into this year.
Yeah, we never take anything for granted in elections, including by-elections. Of course, nothing is guaranteed. I share your thoughts on that Toronto riding and the relatively safe status of it. I'll be paying close attention. I'm sure you will too. Sometime this year, we assume, following Matt Generoux's official departure from Ottawa, that by-election in Edmonton Riverbend could get interesting. It was tighter than Generoux was used to.
I'm praying for Boissonneau versus Jaffer. You could have a debate with the other Randy versus the other Rahim. Could have two stand-ins. That's on my wish list.
Man, we're getting all kinds of fascinating insights and rumors around who could run in that by-election. The Real Talk rumor mill is one of the reasons why people will subscribe to this show, and so we'll throw them a bone here. I will note that none of this is confirmed. None of this has been officially confirmed or denied by any of the parties who are about to be named. But as a courtesy to this audience, let's drag a few names into the conversation for our own entertainment. The Real Talk rumor mill has received reports that former Edmonton mayoral candidate Tim Cartmel could potentially seek the Conservative nomination in that riding. And here's the spicier one, if you ask me. The current deputy leader of Alberta's official opposition, NDP, Raki Pancholi, could consider seeking the Liberal nomination in Edmonton Riverbend. Chew on that one.
I hadn't heard of Raki, but I do know Raki was kind of the Nenshi before Nenshi in that let's sever ties a bit with the federal NDP. Let's make Alberta's NDP more of its own thing. I think she's an incredibly charismatic and sharp person who'd make a terrific candidate. I think that's a seat that still, I think, would lean slightly more conservative. Governments tend to get less popular, kind of between elections. So I think Genereux won by about 4%. I think
tighter
that
than he
would
was
be
used to.
Yeah. So I think that would be the floor. Maybe we'd expect slightly higher odds toward the Conservative candidate, but I think Raki would be a terrific get for the Liberals. I think she's as talented pretty much as anyone in the NDP's caucus, but it would be a huge loss for Nenshi. So Nenshi headed into this year, I think, primed very well for a 2026 election. There's been a ghost, or I guess a water main from his past as Calgary's mayor that's burst. And, some of that splash per se has drenched Nenshi. So he seems to be at a point where he's defending parts of his record as mayor of Calgary. So if he loses his top lieutenant and someone who's been, really the face of a lot of this stuff. I mean, Raki, you've seen her everywhere on television. I'm sure you've had her on your show. She's really been the face of kind of a lot of the Alberta New Democrat outreach. So, I mean, if she were to go away, that would be a huge hole for Nenshi that he would have a lot of challenges in filling.
Yeah, and I will acknowledge that this is pure speculation. This is the Real Talk rumor mill. Read the fine print before reporting this to your friends. Yeah. And again, this is most certainly not from the Pancholi nor
Although Raki might want to look at Rod Loyola. So you don't have a great track record of NDP MLAs jumping into a liberal nomination in federal elections. If recent history is any indication.
Nice poll. Excellent reference. Pancholi not dogged by connections and allegations around affiliations or affinity toward socialist or communist policies and the like.
No, she'd be a huge get. I think were Nenshi not to have jumped into that leadership race, I think there's a very good chance she'd be the leader of the Alberta NDP right now. She's a hugely talented communicator and hugely, she'd be a terrific get for any kind of center-left federal party.
It's always good to see your face, man. Happy New Year.
Likewise.
Congratulations on the upcoming arrival. That's pretty exciting news for you.
Because you have one more day to say Happy New Year per Supriya Dwivedi / Larry David.
Oh, yeah, you did see that. Hey, now you get credit for watching full episodes, man. I like that.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, buddy, we'll talk to you soon.
Likewise, great seeing you.
Yeah, you got it. That's Rahim Mohamed, columnist for the National Post. Of course, he's referencing Alberta Premier Danielle Smith's comment that Calgary's big water main break, and you're going to go, Jespo, if you're listening from, Ontario, BC, Manitoba, you're going to go, are we still talking about that story from the Stampede last year? No! A new headache for the city of Calgary. Another devastating water main break, and Alberta's premier is looking to pin it on former Calgary Mayor Naheed Nenshi. Of course, it's advantageous politically and otherwise for her to do so, but that's a conversation that's continuing. We'll have to get friend of the show, Calgary Mayor Jeremy Farkas, on to talk about that. Johnny, I don't know if you noticed, but over the holidays, he was there on his, I think he was on his Instagram. I'm sure he had it across his social media platforms. He had the PPE on. He had like the safety vest on. He had the hard hat on. There was a big backhoe behind him. He was on the scene. I won't say supervising because that would take away from the people in those real roles, but he was overseeing seeing or at least observing some of those early repair efforts on that water main break. Nothing like jumping into the deep end just a couple of months after being elected as mayor. This is something that, politically, nobody thinks that it's really the mayor's fault when a water main breaks, but people want to know about infrastructure planning and funding and all that kind of stuff.
And I'm sure Jeremy was ready.
He's got his hands full.
He's got the waterproof pants and boots because, as far as I know, when I looked into it after, this problem hadn't been solved. No. All they had done was repair pretty much the one main that had broken along with a couple other sections. But to me, in my mind, I'm like, how many other parts of this could explode?
Well, and not just Calgary. And I know you're not across the province, across the country.
Years and years of, no upkeep.
And these are big conversations when you talk about infrastructure deficits. We've heard from municipalities, and again, we'll reference our home province, but this probably is a story that holds true across the country, right? You're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars.
So much money.
Number one, who's going to pay for it? Everybody wants the feds or the province, or municipalities can't afford to do that stuff on their own. And second of all, these aren't the types of ribbon cuttings that politicians want to do.
Not at all.
Yeah, hey everybody, we spent $4 billion on redoing the sewer lines. Nobody gives a shit. If you're going to spend $4 billion on two new hospitals, everybody loves you.
When things happen like this, you of course care, but you understand, remember, just a smaller scale of what we're talking about here, you had to replace a line under your house once.
We did.
Do you remember how much money that was just for one line from your house to the street? Imagine these huge main lines of sewers, and I can't even imagine.
Man, I thought that we had a tree root. Our sewer lines, we live in a heritage home, 110 years old. So you get these, these lines are like clay lines. Trina Moyles is in our green room. The guy's talking about his sewer lines when she's waiting to talk about her new book. We'll get her in here in a minute. But these old lines that they used 100 years ago, these clay lines, they're susceptible to tree roots. We got these big elm trees, and the roots will grow through. Mm-hmm. So, from time to time, you have to run a snake down there. People that know, right? And it goes down and it kind of burrows, and it's interesting, and you got to keep your lines clean. If you don't, you can imagine you get backups. So we had a nasty backup in our basement. This was, 5, 6, 7 years ago. I'm talking the nastiest kind of backup in our basement. And I thought, gosh, we're going to have to get the snake in. We're going to have to. So I call the guy. He brings it over, and I'll never forget his face. They get the camera down there, and I'm thinking this is going to be $240, and they're going to bore it out.
Yeah,
and we're
maybe $5, maybe if the high end.
And he shows me the video, and it is the whole line.
It
stood for 105 years, but it had catastrophically collapsed.
Yeah.
And these weren't his exact words, but I knew from the look on his face that this is about to get a whole lot more expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
I see Cactus Sheriff in our live chat on the, the wrath, the treason thing, the treasonous kooks per former Premier Jason Kenney. Cactus Sheriff says, F it. If a law is broken, I say plaster the mugshot everywhere. Show that we still have the rule of law. Otherwise, you get the United States. That from Cactus Sheriff. I mean, for all of these separatists, many of them who have photos up right now, they're ripping off the newest images. Can we? I don't know if you have it on your computer. That image that I had, that you and I had been looking at yesterday of Donald Trump, the map. Did you see that one with the United States, the stars and stripes? Maybe I'm just imagining sending it to you, but it was on a map of North and South America. They had the American flag or the stars and stripes over the continental U.S. and Alaska. They had it over Venezuela. They had it over Greenland, superimposed. I may have just imagined sending this to you. And they have they have the stars and stripes over the province of Alberta as well, which just is really, to be honest with you, really pissing me off. Yeah. Especially, and I know everyone's going to say, take a breath, stay calm, be the bigger person, keep the conversation focused on Alberta's #1 talk show, and we will. But a lot of these, as Supriya said, chuckleheads that right now are looking to drag Canada to the United States. There may not be laws broken here, but this is something I think, obviously, that people need to be taking seriously. If you don't take a referendum seriously, it can go sideways.
Sure.
And so we'll continue to drive that conversation through 2026, fueled in large part by your thoughts, not just in our live chat, but in emails to the show to talk@ryanjesperson.com as well. Trina Moyles coming up in just a moment. First, let me remind you that nothing happens here on Real Talk without the support of incredible partners like our friends at North Road Investment Council. When it comes to investing, and maybe you're taking a look at your finances, your wealth planning, your retirement planning early this year. It's a great time to do it. When it comes to investing, more and more private clients and institutions are asking the exact same question. If most mutual funds aren't keeping up with their benchmark, then why not just own the benchmark itself? So you've all heard of the S&P 500. Research in 2024 shows that over 80% of Canadian equity mutual funds are underperforming the index that they track. At North Road Investment Council, they build customized passive portfolios designed to capture index returns while still respecting your values and preferences. For families and institutions with around $2 million or more to invest, North Road can create fully customized factor portfolios within Canada and the U.S. North Road celebrates the fact that markets are competitive. You can reach out to them today on their website, northroadic.com, to learn more about building your custom portfolio. Hey, how many of you swung by the Mother Dough Bread Co. over the holidays to check out the newest offering from Freeland Brothers, their new sandwich shop? This is a first for them. 70 years in business, but this is a new one, is now open in Alberta's capital city at Winterburn Point, featuring sandwiches using Freeland Brothers' legendary signature sourdough focaccia baguettes. Did I say that right? Focaccia? It's been too long since I last said it. Stop by to try a Farmhouse Club sandwich, a pesto chicken caprese, a Sunday beef pot roast sandwich. That's my personal favorite. And don't forget a fresh sourdough cinnamon bun for dessert. You can learn more at motherdoughbreadco.com or swing by Winterburn Point in Edmonton. Shout out to our friends at Kubi Renewable Energy for an incredible first decade in business. 2025, they celebrate 10 years. 2026, they'll look to grow on that. And what I've noticed in partnering with this remarkable Alberta company is its technical first mindset. In Alberta, BC, Saskatchewan, Yukon, and beyond, Kubi shows that its foundation, built by certified electricians and engineers, means that every system is designed and installed with precision, safety, and long-term performance in mind. Their focus is always on delivering quality solar solutions that are built to last. It's always a good time to get a free solar quote from the team at Kubi. You know, they're not going to be up on your roof this month putting the panels in, but you get the engineering done. You figure out what government incentives are available, and then they can hit the ground running for you, or maybe hit the roof in the spring. Learn more at kubi.ca. That's KUBY.ca. And a wonderful conversation kind of came out of nowhere on yesterday's show, talking about ER wait times. Obviously a tragic story. A 44-year-old Edmonton father losing his life after waiting 8 hours in an Edmonton ER. That was at the Grey Nuns Hospital. Well, Real Talkers took on the conversation and started talking about what we can do to offer better supports and to free up availability in our ERs. And if you paid attention to our January 5th episode, you know that it led us to a conversation about the Bridge Healing Program. This is a remarkable partnership between the Royal Alexandra Hospital Foundation and the Jasper Place Wellness Center. We got a ton of emails on this yesterday, and I'm glad that it inspired many of you to learn more about it. You can check it out online at royalalex.org/bridge healing, or just Google Bridge Healing Program to learn more. We're working with the Royal Alexandra Hospital Foundation this year to help them raise supports for this incredibly important program that is delivering results. You know, nearly 22,000 individuals experiencing homelessness that visited Alberta's ERs in 2024, most were discharged without a place to go. Bridge Healing Program is changing that, and we encourage you to support them if you can. It's been a while since we've had our next guest on the show. Trina Moyles has been an expert voice for us on matters of the environment, including wildfires, based in large part on her experience in a fire tower lookout. And last time she was on the show, Trina told us that she was working on a book about bears. And what an honor it is to welcome this environmental journalist, creative producer, and author to the show on release day.
Yeah, so
congratulations.
exciting.
How are you
Thank
feeling?
you.
Release day is a big deal. Like this is your baby, right?
Yeah, it's like 7 years in the making. It's always so surreal. And even this time, even more, because my last book came out in the pandemic. So I didn't get to do anything in person. So yeah, it's such a thrill.
I was when we were talking, I was under the impression, and the cover, or at least at first glance, may lead people to believe that this is a book exclusively about bears, about one of my favorite animals on planet Earth, and one of the animals that we Canadians most marvel at, that we're maybe most proud at, that maybe we fear the most. But this book is about so much more than that. Take us into it.
Yeah, this book, wow. I always say this book is like my whole heart. I think this is probably the most real thing I've ever written as a writer. It's and it started in so many different places. I grew up in Peace River, Alberta. My dad was a wildlife biologist, and so I had a really interesting intro into like human bear coexistence. My first encounter with a black bear was when I was 5 years old in 1990. There was a cub that had unfortunately been orphaned in a logging accident, and the cub was brought in. My dad brought it home to our childhood basement for a night before being shipped off to the Calgary Zoo. I'm pretty sure biologists can't do that anymore, but those were the 90s. And I mean, that just had a huge impression on me of connecting with wildlife and understanding some of the impacts that wildlife face due to industry and human encroachment. So it started there. I wound up at a fire tower in my early 30s, trying to work on my first book, or my second book, actually. No, it was my first book. And there I also encountered the black bear. And then I had to learn how to live with black bears alone. And that really brought me into this book of like, how do we coexist with bears? There's all these things we learn on paper. We take these bear awareness workshops. And then you find yourself alone in the woods with a bear, and what do you do? So people say, why did you write this book? And I'm like, the bear was right there, meters away from me. What choice did I have? So,
yeah, sure. I'll let people know the majority of folks will be listening to this on the podcast, but you have provided us with some incredible videos, some phenomenal photos. And so I would encourage people, if you are listening to this on the podcast, to maybe move over and check out this episode on YouTube. These are all images that you've captured and really remarkable stuff. The fire tower lookout job. We were talking about this before you were here with us in studio. If you're just joining us, Trina Moyles in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. It's like a job that, I mean, most people can't even really understand what would be involved, but the solitude of it, but the isolation of it, what you would see, what you wouldn't see in the form of fellow humans. I mean, just a wild experience.
Yeah, totally. It's I'm so glad I did it. I did it for 7 years. I never thought I would do it that long. It's the most miraculous job, and I'm so glad and lucky that I had the chance to do it, because who knows how long they'll be around with the development of AI technology and whatnot, but probably at least another decade in Alberta.
You talked about how you realized, like, you kind of came to this I don't know whether it was an epiphany or not. That's not the word you use, but you had to question the story, you say, that you were telling yourself about the bear as aggressive and as dangerous and as a threat. What changed your mind? It was a gradual process?
Well, it was very interesting. So I wound up at a fire tower. It was my 4th year as a fire tower lookout. And this tower had a reputation for being like a bear tower. It was a bit closer to a community. It was in the right location where it was just like perfect bear habitat. And everyone knew this. So I knew what I was getting myself into, but I didn't know what that was going to mean in practice. What I had learned growing up is a pretty common conservation management practice today. And it's called mutual avoidance. It's the idea of keeping humans separate from bears. And that's a good thing. I don't want to say that's a bad thing. That is a good thing. But the problem there was that I had inherited a tower where bears were very comfortable in the proximity of the tower. They'd been allowed there for 10 years. And so I showed up, rolled in that first year. I tried all the things my dad had taught me as a biologist and a conservation officer. And that's that you deter bears. You make bears afraid of people. And that just didn't work. I encountered a very defiant mother bear who, nothing dangerous happened, but I did have some tense encounters with her. And I just realized this approach wasn't working. If I had continued down that path, that bear would have wound up probably being put down, and her cubs too, because she had cubs as well. And they were also habituated to the site. So what did I do? I actually kind of backed off and I gave the bears their space. And it kind of brought me into this idea of actually moving towards peaceful coexistence. And trying to, work with the bear and learn about the bear. Because when we approach anything from a place of fear, we can't learn about it, right? We can't learn about what their behaviors actually are, what they mean. And so, and I turned to other bear experts who practice, this form of engagement with bears in other places, and I learned a lot. And then what wound up was, 4 remarkable years of watching this young bear, Osa, who I first refer to in the book. She had 2 white stripes on her chest, so she was really easy to identify. And watch her grow up and become a mother and raise her cubs, and, to be able to live together and share the landscape in a way where we weren't, causing problems for the other. And, it worked out.
You write beautifully about Osa, by the way, and you can tell that you deeply care. I mean, the whole book there's evidence throughout that you're writing about things that you care deeply about, and you're willing to share details about your personal life, about your family's life, about your upbringing and the surroundings where you grew up that would be difficult to talk about for a lot of people. You talk about growing up in that area of Peace River, and you talk about predatory forces. And a lot of people, based on the cover and the title of the book, would assume that you're talking about bears, and they'd wonder if it was grizzlies or black bears, but that would be about it. But you're not writing or talking about the bears at all.
Yeah, and that was like when I started working on the book, I'll admit I was writing about bears. And then the more I wrote about bears, I was like, we have the story of bears so wrong. The stories we love the most about bears are bear attack stories. And there are numbers, to back that up when you look at, which headlines get the most number of clicks. They're always related to attack stories. And that's such a small part of the story of living with bears because those attacks happen so incredibly rarely. So I began to reflect on, growing up in northern Alberta, and I do write about the story of my brother and I. We were 2 siblings in our family, and, we were very, very close growing up. And I thought about what did it mean to grow up in Peace River in the 90s? That was a time, that oil was like about to boom, and that did define our childhood in a lot of ways. So I began to think about risk differently, The stories people love about bears are about bear attacks, but what are the risks that people who live in bear country actually face? It's not bears, it's isolation. It's lack of amenities sometimes. And that wasn't necessarily the true for us, but I'm thinking about this in a broader sense of northern remote communities that interface with bears. And it was, things like substance abuse. It was mental health issues. It's high rates of suicide. So these are the risks that are actually impacting northern communities. And I wanted to turn that story of bear on its head. It's the story of bear is such a small part of people who live in bear country. Most of the interactions people have are pleasant or benign, but it's these attack stories that grab the headlines, while, the more deadly risks are the stories that don't.
My algorithm is all bears right now, and I don't know if that's because I've been doing interview prep or just because that's what else I've been watching, but I've seen, there's the videos you see from Arctic communities of the polar bear that sort of meanders or walks into the community and surprises a resident who barely escapes on the snowmobile. There's been a story making the rounds, I'm sure you've seen it, of a young black bear cub that was burned. Its paws and its snout, and it was found ostensibly abandoned, and there's been a wildlife rehab group somewhere in Western Canada. I can't remember exactly. In Smithers, in BC, that's been working to rehab this. I mean, I just feel like you've been paying attention to bears in so many different ways, and it's been fascinating for me as well to read the comments and what people have to say about it. And not just Canadians, it's not just limited to us, but Canadians it's a fascinating relationship in how we view this animal and see this animal. And I remember our family celebrated a momentous occasion a couple of years ago in Canmore, and I remember talking to folks that lived there about the prevalence of bears in that community, and the fact that some folks had been requested, or even had it demanded that they remove some of the fruit-producing trees in their yards because they were drawing bears into the community. And then, of course, that prompted debate on human expansion and development of our communities and displacing these animals. And I mean, it is a big conversation. It's not just bears, but bears kind of represent in many ways these bigger stories that you touch on in the book.
Yeah, I thought for me that was an in. And I think it's easier to write about bear stories than it is to write about our own stories. And so I think that provided an in for me to be able to get into those human stories, because really what does it mean to live with bears? Usually it involves human behavior, right? Whether it's a fruit tree, or whether it's, someone's left a bag of dog food out, or like what northern communities are facing is unmanaged garbage dumps. That's huge. It's really hard to keep bears out of dumps, and further north you go, the more challenging that is because of issues of snow, of ice, of burying garbage as possible, all these things. And so in some ways we set bears up to fail, right? But we make bears the story versus our own habits as humans.
When did you decide, like when you said when you started writing the book, you set out to write about bears? At what point did you decide to share about your childhood, your relationship with your brother, with Brendan, and to talk about early experiences with alcohol and addiction impacting your family, and the joy of the arrival of a new niece, and ultimately the tragic passing of your brother, the years of estrangement. I mean, this is like hard on the sleeve kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Did you realize early that was going to be a big part of your book about bears?
No. I mean, the book did become personal in early drafts, and I'm telling you, there was like 20 drafts of this book. It took me a really long time to get to the finished product, but I knew I wanted it to be really personal, because when you watch bears and you start to build a relationship with bears, you think about your own relationships, because they do. I think people love them so much and love these videos of them because they look just like us. Mm-hmm. The way like a mother bear nurses her cubs, that was something I got to witness at my fire tower, and you see like her exasperation with her cubs, or mom bears like deal in tough love, and I think that's why the mother bear is such a symbol for people in their communities. But sadly, I lost my brother in the process of writing this book, and I turned very internal with the writing, and it did become an exercise in like processing my grief and thinking about that relationship. But even before my brother had passed, he'd always been under the surface. That'd been the hardest story and the hardest relationship in my life. So I did use this book as a way to explore that relationship. And an early reader an editor who read it, she said, this is, in some ways, this isn't a book of grief because your brother is so alive in these pages. And I think, I highly encourage people who are going through, difficult losses in their life to turn to writing, because it does help to be able to process, some of the events, some of the memories. And so my brother became alive in these pages because I wanted to be close to him and honor that relationship, and also think about the ways that I had misjudged my brother and gotten that relationship wrong, just like I had gotten the relationship with the bears wrong. They're not the same, but they are parallel stories in a way. And the bear story helped me maybe be able to have the courage to go into that story with my brother after he'd passed.
Well, you honor him with your writing, and you weave those two ideas together beautifully. And as the book, I mean, what do you call it? Like a subheading or a subtitle, I guess? The Black Bear, a story of siblinghood and survival. Bigger picture, what sort of conversations or realizations, what sort of quiet thoughts or maybe debates do you hope that this book creates or fosters with people that have a chance to pick it up?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question. The book, it is a very internal story, but I think it does come out at a time, of incredible divisiveness. Like, even what you were talking about with your guests prior to me, like, I grew up in Alberta, you grew up in Alberta. Like, whoever thought we would have gotten to this place of this conversation of Alberta leaving Canada? Like, it's, the girl in the basement, the 5-year-old in the basement with the bear cub would have, thought that was such a mortifying idea. We're living in such crazy divisive times, and I guess what I hope readers take away from the book is that our relationships and our families matter. Like, families are divided over these issues right now, and I think a lot of people will be able to relate to that. So in sharing my story, I hope that offers some solace, some comfort, and also a reminder to not take one another for granted, and to stop dehumanizing one another for our differing political views.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point to me. That's something I try to remind myself about, like, every single week.
Yeah.
Because we talk about like the hottest stuff. We talk about the most uncomfortable stuff, and it's oftentimes on those files that people have the strongest opinions, or people have the strongest conviction, and will argue something with more passion than they'll approach anything else.
Yeah. And in the book I describe that as like, it's like the hairs on your arms go up, like hackles up. Like, we become sort of like animals in that moment, don't we? And it's easy to feel that way when you're in the presence of a bear too, very afraid and very defensive. We've been taught to like shout and show aggression at bears, and there's a place for that. But there's some encounters with bears where the bear is actually being totally curious or peaceful, and that that fear and that antagonism doesn't help. Like, just like that doesn't help bringing that into our human relationships too. And that's what I love about your guys' show so much. Like, Like I know there's listeners, who have all different political beliefs and come from different backgrounds. And it's a cool place to be able to come here on launch day, because I think this is the platform of reaching out to folks from all different political backgrounds. And this book taught me a lot about trying to reconsider my own position and thinking about what I bring into conversations with people.
I love that. And by the way, we're honored to have you here on Launch Day. It's a big deal. And I'll let people know we probably planned this interview further in advance than any other interview in the last year. Had it circled on the calendar as soon as we knew what the release date would be, because it is such a big deal. And I know that it's something like, you again, the premise of this whole book, you're using the bear, you're talking about it, writing about it, making these observations literally, but also metaphorically. Yeah. And you do so in really effective fashion. What's your assessment? It almost seems like you got to ask this next question, province by province, but your assessment on how the bear population is being managed. And we can talk about conservation. We can talk about hunting. It's very different when you look at the bear populations in different provinces, including BC and Alberta. I think people would be surprised at the numbers. But you have an informed opinion on this. A lot of people, including me, are more kind of the armchair quarterbacks. We think we know, but you do. Your thoughts on how the bear population is being managed?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's so true. What I've realized through the research of this book is human-bear coexistence is such a highly localized thing. It means something different to different communities across the country, and in the States as well, wherever, or wherever humans and bears overlap on the landscape across the world. Like, it really is a localized thing. So sometimes it's really hard to speak to what's happening in a community, and we don't know what that relationship with bear looks like, because bears are so highly individualized, just like communities are, right? But I do still think that this concept of mutual avoidance is what's really managing bears in conservation officers and biologists' efforts to keep people and bears apart. And I really sympathize with that. And, and it's worth pointing out too that conservation officers in a lot of jurisdictions have lost resources. There's fewer people. It's almost impossible to respond to all of the, the calls they get about human bear encounters. So I really, really feel for people. It's, waste, I think, is such a big thing when we think about what's bringing bears into communities. Well, it's a number of things. It is climate change as well. I mean, climate change it looks different in every community, right? Whether it's a heat dome event where there's a berry crop that fails and you've got bears wandering into town, or in Churchill, Manitoba, where I've been lucky to spend some time for research, it's, the loss of sea ice and bears waiting longer time on land. So, what do bears do? Well, they lead by their nose and by their stomach. And, a bear's sense of smell is incredible. When you look at the anatomy of their nose, all that whole structure, it's incredible. It's far superior to ours. So they're going to come where the food is. And I think, the issue of unmanaged garbage dumps and waste are huge issues, whether that's oil and gas camps that spring up, whether that's, community garbage dumps. There's all sorts of things that are bringing bears in. And so we definitely have a role to play in cleaning up our act to make it easier for them to, to navigate this rapidly changing landscape due to climate pressures.
I was just in Kananaskis a few days ago. Of course, I don't have to tell you, K Country hosted the G7 mid last year, and I remember the outcry. We talked about it a little bit on the show, but it was a story that flew under the radar. I understand people have, respectfully to the bears, people have bigger things to worry about for the most part. But when it had surfaced that they were basically clear cutting a bunch of these berry bushes for better sight lines, and they said better security for these foreign dignitaries that were arriving in K Country. But a lot of wildlife advocates, in particular around bears, were pointing out the huge impact that would have midsummer on the bear population and its ability to feed, and what the spin-off could be. It to me, it was kind of a bigger picture conversation about just what humans are willing to sacrifice or do or wipe out for convenience, as opposed to something that's integral to the survival of another species. Some may say I'm blowing it out of proportion, but I don't think so.
Yeah, and what you're referring to, it's so interesting because that definitely caught my attention about the clearing of berry bushes right around the community. And so I did dig into it a little bit. I think there was some, I don't want to say misreporting, but it may have been a little bit over sensationalized.
Okay, well, thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, what I hear, like the community group, and I do add, like I think that is the right approach, like in terms of, especially if those are like highly used recreational trails, like, and there's sometimes like blind corners and stuff. So there's a place for it for sure. The headline that really like made me laugh about the G7 was just like this fear of the public leaders attending the G7. And I remembered I posted something funny on my socials of like, do we really need to protect, the G7 leaders from bears, or do we need to protect bears from G7 leaders, and people loved that because I think, it's true. Like bears are facing the greater risk here. It's not us as humans on the landscape. It's issues like habitat loss. But I do want to advocate for that community group in Kananaskis because I think they're doing great work around coexistence. And I felt like there was maybe some misreporting there around the tearing up of berry bushes. So
yeah. I want to just jump into our live chat. We have an audience, as you know, like show to show, very engaged. But what we're talking about here has resonated with a lot of people. Cool. I'm just going to read a bunch of comments at random, and you can comment on the ones that you want. Aaron says bears die every year on train tracks. Says it's very sad. She says, I've heard it's the salt. She says, though I don't remember exactly why. I've heard that grain cars can spill a bunch.
Exactly.
That's why we hear of like the Boss and Split Lip and others. And I mean, there's highway accidents too. It's obviously a huge issue. Christine talking about your brother and his death. She says, heartbreaking and a part of so many families. Christine says, I can't wait to read this book. Ken K says, when we were younger, my wife and I were hiking in a fairly remote area around Jasper, and we're being followed by a black bear. He says, I never go out without bear spray anymore. Others are talking about the potential implications of raising speed limits on highways. Others are talking about your comments around divisiveness and social interactions. Cool. Mark says, I think everybody has to strive for less divisiveness and demand it of our politicians. To keep Alberta in Canada and to have a good future. Christine says, I'm a voracious reader and I'm going to be searching for this book today after work, which is awesome. We'll talk about where people can find your book in a second. Others are again, I think that, your comments on the relationships that people have and the tone of our conversations really resonated with a lot of people. That's something where I don't know that we have enough people, and I'll shine the spotlight on myself too and call myself to the carpet more. I don't know that we have enough people calling for not consensus, but just respectful debate, respectful sharing and exchange of ideas. And there's got to be a parallel there too when we talk about the intersection of the economy and the environment. Right? Mm-hmm. Like, are you here advocating to shut down all the oil and gas sites and to stop expanding our highways and to build no further communities? And I mean, where do you land on all that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, these are big topics, but I think, no, I'm not. And I hope I made that clear in the book too. Like, I'm not fundamentally opposed to oil and gas or to development. It's about thinking about the impacts. It's about being careful in moving forward. Sometimes I feel like right now, for example, we're so tied to disaster politics. Something big happens and then we think we need to react immediately. That's often how major projects get built in the first place, is it's like, you create a disaster, a problem, and then it's this like respond to react. And I think reactiveness doesn't necessarily help us in, whether that's like national planning or if that's like in our own human relationships. Coming from a place of reactiveness sometimes is not a great thing. And so I guess what I want the book, is that like we need development, we need economic development, we need some of these projects, but is there a way to do it where it's with communities, where it's with actually, prioritizing environment and taking environmental needs into place? Because I think Alberta has a pretty shoddy history of that over the last 40, 50 years. And now, to be honest, not living in Alberta, and when I come back, it's really sad to see the habitat loss, the fragmentation, hearing stories of biologists being burnt out and wanting to leave the system. This is sad. And to see the transformation of the landscape over such a relatively short amount of time is sad to me. That's a loss to me. I don't live in my hometown anymore, but when I go back and I see, the rapid rate of deforestation or hearing stories of contamination and the impacts that those communities living downstream are facing, that's really heartbreaking. So I think we need to bring, I want the book to open up the conversation of working together for the health of our, the long-term health, not just the short-term profit.
I've got an email here from Lorraine, who's listening to us live on the Mixler live streaming audio app, and she sort of like honed in on your comment about bears as individuals, and she wants me to ask you about maybe a story that your face just like lit up into a smile. I feel like you already know where you're going to go with this, but just a question around maybe some bear behavior or a bear experience that surprised you, or where you saw that sort of individual nature of bears really manifest itself.
Yeah. Oh, well, my face lit up because I just love the bears so much. And I love talking about bears much more than I love talking about politics. Yeah.
I didn't plan on talking any politics with you, but I'm happy you took us there.
I definitely became a little bit of a crazy bear person out there. And I think people who have these rare encounters with bears, you just can't help it. You do lean into it. And especially when you truly start to learn some of their behaviors. But the most nerve-wracking experience I had with a bear, I didn't even include in the book and I didn't because I was like, this would be an easy grab. But the reality is what happened. I did have one close call. There was a grassy trail that led from my tower, and I was out on a run with my dog Holly, and I was carrying my bear spray. Everybody should carry bear spray all the time when you're out on the land, and you shouldn't assume that it's not bear country, because bear country is really everywhere. Bear country is our country. And this large male bear came running at me. It was terrifying. I had clipped off the safety on the canister of bear spray. I was ready. And then the bear veered off the trail, stood up, and I knew that when a bear stands up, it's not an act of aggression, it's curiosity. The bear's just trying to get a read, probably get a scent on me. Maybe he didn't scent me.
It's just intimidating as hell.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was like, this is it. This is the end. I was very afraid. And then he sauntered off, and I was like, oh, it's okay. But then shortly after, I saw another bear, and that bear just, spooked off immediately and was smaller. And I realized what had happened is I'd come between likely a courting pair, a male pursuing a female in peak breeding season. And so here I am on the landscape, and that's a time of year where it's critical for them. It matters. They have a very short window to mate. No kidding, that male bear that came out with me was a bit annoyed because I'd probably gotten in the way, of him following his lady. And so that made me reflect back on that encounter and think oh, okay, I had portrayed that as aggression and that bear coming at me. That probably had nothing to do with me. He was irritated, and bears will do that with each other. That's what one bear expert said to me. It's hard because most people don't see bears, but the best way to learn about bears is to watch bears communicating with one another. And they do lots of interesting things, and actually they're quite dog-like. So that was an interesting observation for me to realize they're a bit like a dog in that the hair will come up on their back. They'll lower their head. Their body gets a bit stiff. There was this one male I called Oscar he was around, that's him right there for people who are watching.
Nice job, Johnny.
Yeah, perfect timing. And he would walk with this kind of hilarious stiff-legged cowboy. I called it a cowboy gait. And it was a bit he was just sort of this is my territory, this is my country. But as soon as you know that, what do? You just kind of back off and give space. And so I think, the problem with keeping people and bears apart all the time, which again, I sympathize with conservation officers, but we never get to learn their behaviors. When we're constantly, we approach with fear, we never are able to identify what does a relaxed bear look like versus a truly aggressive bear. So I think I was offered this very, very rare opportunity at the fire tower where I could be up in the tower watching them safely. I had an electric fence that protected my cabin and my engine shed and the tower itself. And so I definitely had a bit of a buffer from the bears too. But when we get to watch them relaxed in their habitat and especially interacting with other bears, then we can pick up on some of those cues. So, and most the reason that we don't hear more about bear attacks is because they don't happen. And most of the encounters that people have with bears are incredibly benign or peaceful or, not maybe a bit of a problem, but not life-threatening. And those rare attack stories that gobble up, the news outlets love them.
Yeah, well, and you see the dramatic, and certainly, obviously, we're not taking away from people that have experienced that horror and that trauma, sometimes fatal, but, the person that survives a mauling and, they have, 300 stitches and staples in their scalp and the whole thing. And then you'll see these posts, I'm always blown away that people think to pull out their phones or that people can even hold their phones steady. But the odd time on a mountain bike track or a hiking trail where someone will encounter a grizzly and they'll move off the trail and this bear will just casually saunter by. It kind of reminds me of these African safari videos that you see of people that are like in a Land Cruiser with no protection, and these lions are just milling around. And I don't know, it's just like this really interesting.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so neat how normalized it is for a lot of us Canadians here. And you know, you think of like Australians who live with all these like deadly snakes and spiders, and then they come to Canada and they're terrified of bears, right? Whereas like,
I think we just maybe lost your audio, but we'll get it back. There it is.
Okay. Oh, perfect. Yeah, it's just interesting. Like, it is, you know, living with bears is very normalized for us here. And that's why it's so cool to read sometimes the comments on those videos of people like advocating for the bear, or like, you should have done this, you should have done that. You know, like everybody wants to have a say.
Yeah.
But a lot of people have had encounters, or, you know, but what I say is that, like, for all the ways that we are on the landscape, bears are incredibly generous of us. They get out of our way most of the time. They're so adept at like adapting to the pressures on the landscape that has rapidly changed due to us and due to climate change and other factors. And I think like if we could just, you know, show them that same generosity, it would be better.
Amazing. Congratulations on the book. I do want to ask you, the book is called Black Bear. If you're just joining our live stream presented by California Closets, we're talking to Trina Moyles, Black Bear, a story of siblinghood and survival. Are there like, I mean, aside from the obvious like appearance and the actual biology, difference between black bears and grizzlies, like major differences that you were able to observe? Or can you take us into a couple? I'm like obsessed with bears and orcas. Those are like my two things. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what's going on with the mic.
There we go. There we go. Yes. Okay. So black bears are built for trees, and that's where they evolved. They evolved in forested landscapes. Grizzly bears evolved out on open plains, and that's sometimes why they say, like, you know, be more nervous in an interaction with a grizzly bear, because a grizzly bear, it's like fight or flight. They might fight, you know, or be defensive. Whereas with the black bear, they have an escape route, right? They can climb a tree, flight. So it was really neat that the area around my fire tower had these huge old trees, and those were called babysitting trees or sanctuary trees. So moms will intentionally den close to those places, because the first thing a cub learns to do when it comes out of the den is climb a tree. So they're evolved with like black bears have shorter claws for digging in and for climbing. But grizzly bears do climb. People should not think that you can just climb, you know, a tree in a situation with a grizzly bear. There are cases of grizzly bears climbing. They have longer claws evolved for like digging and for opening things. And so that's kind of one of the neat sort of differences between and black bears are all different colors too. That's very cool.
Like the cinnamon ones that people talk about, which are often mistaken for grizzlies, I think, right?
Yeah. There was a beautiful cinnamon bear around my tower. Black bears can have really beautiful white blazes, and that's how I was able to identify them. Like Oscar, that bear I was talking about, had this stunning white O on his chest. And apparently there's a higher prevalence of that in Western Canada than elsewhere. So that's kind of neat, seeing those white blazes. And, you know, and people say you can't tell them apart. Oh, you can. Their faces are different. They have scars. You know, there's even some biologists are looking at like developing AI cameras to do like facial recognition for different bears, because people are realizing for bears that are especially that live around in close proximity to communities, it's worth being able to identify them as individuals, because, you know, they're just like us. Some bears are more on edge. Some bears are grumpy bears. Some bears are incredibly relaxed. And it was just like, that was a really cool thing to witness at my fire tower. Like Osa, the bear I described, was just like a really chill bear. I had two surprise close encounters with her and a cub, and it was very relaxed, you know, and I think that's because she knew me. She knew my smell. And I think bears are smart enough to recognize us as individuals as well. So, which comforts me. That actually comforts me, because they're like, oh, it's just Trina and her dog, you know, and people may not realize it, but like, you know, the bears they're watching us. They're reflexive to us. They're constantly responding to us.
Your dog's a husky?
Yes.
Did you have to be careful there? I mean, that's a stupid question. Of course you had to be careful, but like that's its own thing too, right?
It totally is. And going into the fire tower experience, I knew the dogs could actually work against me. People think, oh, I'll get a dog that'll help me in a bear encounter. No, there's lots of evidence that shows that dogs will actually antagonize the situation, and it's harder for a bear to read what a dog is going to do than a person, right? You know, dogs bark, they can charge, they can chase, and I really didn't want a dog that would chase a bear in the chance that a bear turns around and comes back and charges me. And that had happened to other fire tower lookouts before. But, you know, I just wound up, I'll give a shout out to my dog, Holly, who's 17. She was the best bush dog.
Aww.
I did nothing to deserve it because I got her when she was older. But she was so relaxed in encounters. And I think, you know, talking to bear experts now who interface with bears, you know, around the clock, as like commercial bear viewing guides. There's this one guy up in the Yukon who has this amazing bear dog, a Norwegian elk hound, but he trains the dog to be non-reactive. So the dog sees the bear and is aware of the bear, but the dog is not going to do anything to antagonize that situation. But the best thing people can do with dogs that they don't know how, you know, they respond with bears in bear country is to leash them, because then the human is in control. And the dog is looking for you to call the shots, really, unless your dog is a trained bear dog. Keep your dog on a leash in bear country. It just, you know, it's good for your dog, it's good for you, and it's good for the bear.
Is it true what people say about the three types of bears, three species of bears we see in Canada, that if it's black, in worst case scenario, if it's black, fight back, if it's brown, lie down, and if it's white, good night?
You know what's so fun? No, I don't agree with that, and I think that's because like every bear encounter is an individualized experience, like, and every bear is individual, so it's way more dynamic than that. And you know, people give polar bears a really hard time, but I've met lots of people up north who say they'd much rather run into a polar bear than a barrenland grizzly bear. Like a bear,
really?
Yeah, oh yeah, like barrenland grizzly bear like evolves out like on these huge ranges with like very little food source, like. They have to be aggressive because that's the way they hunt, you know? So like they might lock in from you like kilometers away and make that, you know, they're going to like check you out and see what you're about. This is like, I'm talking like in northern, like Arctic Canada. And whereas like, you know, people in Churchill, I met a woman in Churchill who told me she's more afraid of black bears than polar bears, because it's like, again, it's like what we get used to and what, you know, what becomes normalized. Whereas, you know, people in southern Canada would be terrified of a polar bear, and they're huge. They're like double, triple the size of like they make our black bears look puny. They would even make the boss look puny, you know?
No offense, boss.
Yeah. Like full respect for the boss. He's the biggest, baddest bear. We love him. And I guess that's like, you know, kudos to the boss, like, and kudos to these communities that live with these bears, because, you know, people know who they are and they find a way to make it work, you know, and then they're celebrated. You know, the boss is a bear that, you know, probably drives tourism towards Banff and that area, right?
I got to find him. I'm calling up photos of the boss as we speak, because this guy is just so badass.
Yeah.
But I wonder, I mean, like here's a good one. I'm trying to find the photo credit because I want to give credit here. I'm looking at mountainsandtreasures.ca. That's the website. But here's a shot of the boss just looking so badass. And it's, do you think though that the celebrity, in particular, the boss and Split Lip are kind of the two famous grizzlies in Banff National Park, and of course that story will evolve over time as they are supplanted the way that it goes. But you know, you also have, and I see oftentimes it's very skilled wildlife photographers with long lenses that get these beautiful images of these bears, and other times it's tourists that are like hammering on their brakes and hitting the shoulder of the highway and jumping out with their iPhones and obviously thrilled to see a celebrity bear. Considering the amount of terrain that any of these bears would cover. I mean, it really is. It's almost a spiritual experience. It's just like such a treat to see them. But it also, like, it creates a lot of attention, a lot of traffic. I'll note the comment earlier about the train track deaths and the like. Do you have mixed feelings about the celebrity nature of it all?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a good point. I'm really glad you brought that up, because like another bear that was very famous, especially during the pandemic, was the white grizzly, Nakota. And, you know, to see a white grizzly, how rare, like how beautiful, you know, and that bear was photographed and you know, was definitely a bit of an international sensation. And, you know, very, very tragically, I believe that was was it last year or was it 2024? I'll have to jog my memory, but that bear, beautiful bear's cubs were killed in a collision on the highway, I believe in Yoho, and then she was killed like the next day by a vehicle. So I mean, yeah, I mean, if parks has a, you know, rule in place, like don't stop to photograph these bears, it's for your safety and it's for the bear's safety. So that is like something that we have to be really careful about, you know, is like, what is that line? We want to be close to bears and to be able to photograph them, but is this photograph helping or harming the bear? And I think, yeah, with they call them bear jams along highways. Like, these are really dangerous things for bears. So people need to, you know, act with respect in national parks. And it's, you know, bears are not something to be extracted or exploited. Like, we have to do better by them, than we are. And you know, I want to give a shout out to Ainsley Cruikshank, who wrote that amazing article in the Narwhal about train traffic collisions. The reporting she did on that was really fantastic. And those are, we hear about the road collision accidents with bears, and we rarely hear about them with trains. So, yeah, shout out to her.
Yeah, that's November 26th. Ainsley published that story. You can check it out at thenarwhal.ca collision course. It's called Animals Killed on Canada's Railways. A friend of mine, actually, a former colleague of mine, Leah Hennell, with an amazing photo of a grizzly. I don't know if I say, I think I can say scrambling up a shale embankment away from a CP locomotive. That's a powerful capture right
It's
there.
incredible. Yeah, I actually reached out to her to be like, what an amazing shot. Yeah.
Leah's like one of the best photographers I've ever seen in my life.
She's so
her
talented.
Cowboy portraits. Don't get me started on her cowboy portraits.
I want to collab with her this year.
Yeah, well, maybe you will. I love that. Man, I could sit here and, I mean, people are sharing their own bear stories in the comments here. Grumpy Canadian, thank you for your YouTube channel membership, Grumpy, says, one of my earliest memories when I was 6, camping, walking back to our site from the playground, and a cub ran across the road about 100 feet in front of me. He says I was on high alert for the mother. And, I mean, everybody else is talking about, sort of what their friends or their families taught them. Dwayne says, a friend of mine from Northern Alberta told me once that the bears are harmless if you leave them be. He says you can walk by them. I know that we'll put a caveat there and say that you should keep your distance and always have bear spray and bear bells and the like. We had bear bells on our dogs in Kananaskis just for obvious reasons. You just kind of never know. I could honestly talk to you about bears for 6 hours, and I know you could do it too. I've got my own stories. Mine have been just on 2 occasions from a distance, but just absolutely magical backcountry experiences that I will forever hold dear. Beautiful ones. Both times a sow with 2 cubs. Both times. Wow. One of them at Marvel Lake and one of them on the Moose River route around Mount Robson. And we had the luxury of some separation. And so we could just observe and watch. And I'll remember one, the Moose River route story in particular. We had hiked through this, I could call it my old school Facebook albums if I could find it. I'd have to go way back. But it was like, just the hiking day's about to end, and we were up, navigating this pass, and the wildflowers were just out in full bloom, these yellows and purples, and just phenomenal. And we come over this crest, and my buddy just like hammers on the brakes and stops. And as we're walking up behind him, he just goes, "Bear." And we look up, and they were far enough away, but it was this sow and her 2 cubs, and they were going up above the tree line, and it was kind of like boulders and rocks, and just how she was navigating it, and she had, it almost looked like, and I think it was the way that the sun was hitting her coat, but it looked like she had like almost like a silverback, you know what I mean, like the gorilla, the apes, like it almost looked like that.
They get that,
and I'm sure it was made more magnificent by where the sun was at in the sky at that time and everything, but I was just blown away at the majesty of it, and the sort of the cute nature of the cubs, and learning from her and following her, but the power and the deftness and the agility that she showed in navigating that gnarly landscape was just, we just sat there for like probably half an hour, long after they had gone, and just thought about it. And also, it's not lost on me, when we set up camp that night, I was like shitting my pants half the time, just wondering if she would come back. But I figured that she probably wanted nothing to do with us. But if you're lucky enough to encounter a bear in the wild, let alone live out there in the boreal forest in a fire lookout tower, if you've seen it. There's almost not words for it.
Yeah, it's almost spiritual, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like, and so many of us have these encounters, whether it's close or whether it's far, and it's like, I love this about bears and that confidence they embody. One of my favorite lines from the book is, bears knew who they are and where they belong on the landscape. And so we need to make it easier for them, not in all situations, but in many situations, to leave them be, and to if we want to continue to have these stories and have our children talk about these stories, and for bears to be a part of, the landscape, well, then we need to do better by them. So
yeah, I totally agree. Okay, I'm actually doing this in real time as we're talking. I'm going to find you okay, so here's the now keep in mind these photos, this was a hike in 2011, so the camera quality is very poor, and the quality of Facebook uploads are very poor, but you can see here, I'll just show my screen. So this photo was taken like like moments before we saw her and the cubs. So like you can see the wildflower. Like look at those, right?
Yeah, it's
like
stunning.
it's just absolutely beautiful, absolutely unbelievable. And then let me go back in the album a little bit, and then here she is. So we had good distance. We had good distance, but look at that.
Look at her, and you see her ears up.
Look
She's
at
alert.
her ears up, right?
She's watching you. The cubs look relaxed.
Right?
Yeah.
And then they just, as you can imagine, they just kind of walked up that and up that embankment there, and then over the pass and disappeared. But it was like it'll be with me for the rest of my life.
Yeah, it's amazing. And think about all that bear knows in watching you, right? Like she's probably seen lots of other hikers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she's watching to see what you're going to do, but she has a good sense of what you're going to do based on what she knows, especially if she's raising cubs there, right?
Yeah.
And and she's teaching that to the cubs. So it's just like a reminder to people to like that. Bears have these ranges just like we have our communities and our, like Edmonton is my favorite city. It's my hometown city, and there's
You're
certain
not just saying that because you're here?
No, I love it. I always get nostalgic coming downtown where I lived, and I studied at Grant MacEwan. I have so many memories in these neighborhoods, and bears have those memories on the landscape too. So when people feel surprised to see them, remember that bear knows what that bear probably knows what it's doing and has a relationship with the land, right? It's going to a certain food source like we go to our favorite restaurants. So, yeah.
Have you ever heard of a bear named Bo around Patricia Lake?
No, I haven't.
Lauren is telling us. He says there's a bear named Bo that is around Patricia Lake and is absolutely beloved. Highway to Heaven says bear bells are ineffective. I don't know.
Well, some people say because bears are very curious, so there's this thought that bear may come towards a sound that's like,
right?
What's that? Yeah. I mean, I haven't had that directly happen to me, but I've heard other bear experts say that
because I can't stand them.
Yeah,
I actually quite dislike them.
Yeah.
So if this audience member if Highway to Heaven has now freed me from the constraints of the bear bell, it drives me nuts actually. But I've always thought that it was the right thing to do.
I'm not a huge advocate on them. For my first season at the Fire Tower, I put one on my dog, and then it inevitably fell off, and I didn't like the sound either. And then I actually remembered Charlie Russell, who's another Albertan who was a big advocate for peaceful coexistence with bears. People will know Charlie's work for sure, and some of it was a bit controversial at times, but he said he's like that's ridiculous. The bear is smarter than that. They're probably going to smell you first. They're going to literally hear you step on a branch that breaks, so they're going to hear that first. What I do if I'm like on a densely a trail where there's not like open line of sight, that's where I usually like to recreate, is on trails with open line of sight, because I know if I'm going to have an encounter with the bear will hopefully see me in advance. But in tighter, bushier areas, like, the hay bear goes a long way.
Yeah.
Hay bear. And it doesn't need to be aggressive. It's just like, let the bears know that you're in the area, because there could be a bear in the area. So, and also watching for sign of bears is a big one. Looking for tracks, looking for scat, they love to rub on power poles or trees. I always look at big spruce trees if there's little snags of hair, because they rub and they leave their scent, and it's a way of them it's like their own version of social media, like letting other bears know who's in the area, and it's a territory thing, and it's they'll rub more prominently in mating season as well. So you start to learn all these things. With black bears, you can look for scratch marks on the tree, and how fresh are those those scratch marks or those claw marks. So there's all sorts of cues that bears are giving us. We just need to learn more about them.
There's nothing
tap
like
into them.
There's nothing like steaming scat on a trail to put your head in a very interesting place when you're out there hiking.
So when I worked on this book, A Funny Story, I actually got invited to do some of the writing at the Great Bear Lodge, which is this bear viewing lodge on the West Coast in the Great Bear Rainforest, and that's a commercial bear viewing operation. But it was the off season, so there were no tourists there, and there were no most of the bears had hibernated by that point. But the bear expert there, Tom Rivest, I'll give a shout out to him. I was like, I would always send him pictures of like the scat, and he's like, now be honest, did you put the back of your hand to the pile of scat to see how fresh it was? And I was like, yes. So yeah, there's got to be some. Maybe that makes me sound weird, but bear people are definitely a little bit weird.
No, I don't think it's weird, and it's very like telltale. Like it's a grizzly, and there's oftentimes, depending on I guess the season, but like berries all through.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Cool.
It's totally interesting.
Yeah.
I was telling you about my bear dominated algorithm. Trail cams are like providing incredible insights.
They are.
And I saw one just a few days ago. A black bear came up and was scratching its back, and I think it was a tree. And then it showed a grizzly. I don't know how much time had passed, but then the grizz came through and was sure to to scratch against the same one and establish kind of whose trail it was.
It's amazing, and maybe it's like says something about us as like voyeurs as humans, but trail cameras are an amazing way to do non-invasive bear research, right? And so and researchers all across the country are using these to figure out the ways that bears use their landscape. And I also know some private landowners. I bet there's Albertans out there who have these trail cameras up around their property too. And it's a great way to figure out when the bears are coming by, what they're doing, how many bears, are coming by. Yeah, that's the cinnamon black bear there, Canelo. So this was this is Oscar, the beautiful black bear there. And this was an ATCO pole on the trail that I used to run. And it was this epic pole that was like the new one. They replaced it, but it was like worn down into an hourglass. Like that's how many bears came through there. And there was other wildlife species too. I'd see wolves and moose. So I highly advocate the use of trail cameras, especially on private land where it's your own. And then obviously on First Nations and whatnot, you need permission from different groups. But it's an amazing, peaceful way to be able to watch bears and figure out what they're doing.
Yeah, Johnny's showing us right now a video that you've provided of a black bear just right up on that trail cam lens. And it's just like, it's the privilege of being able to see such a magnificent animal in such close proximity. And also I know if he was that close in real life, you'd be absolutely
totally. And that was Osa's mother, actually. And that was the bear I had a bit of a contentious relationship with in my very first season. She was the mother of Osa, the bear that I had a much closer relationship with. And yeah, you get to see them do all sorts of neat things here. Look, see, the bear is scratching. They have scent glands all over them. And so it's scratching its head and its neck in, leaving the scent, leaving a message. Who knows what it's saying, And I always love that about bears too. There's always this element of mystery where we're not going to get to know everything. And I like that. Just like, with one another too. We don't know everything about one another. Yeah. And that's like the beauty of, sometimes these situations and, that can be a little bit messy, but again, like not reacting from a place of reactivity and fear, but trying to learn about someone else and other species and then be able to, make the next step, I guess.
I keep trying to clear you up and let you go because I know you have a big day here, but then people just keep adding more. Yay. And we're talking about one of my favorite subjects. And so what am I going to do? This is the luxury, a career in terrestrial radio. Johnny and I both, we always had hard outs. Our show ended at this exact time. That's not the case here. So we chat a little bit more. And I encourage this audience to hold me to account and to challenge me. And Alberta Ganger is doing that and says it's so funny that Ryan is concerned about them clearing berries in K country, but he wants to lay pipe and emit even more carbon dioxide, more CO2. I've talked about my support of pipelines when done right with proper consultation and environmental awareness, but we do talk about the finding that line, and we've talked about it in this interview about the environment and the economy and jobs and our natural resources that include wildlife and the thing, and I don't mind the comment, and I would be happy to have a comment over a beer with anybody in a bar. I think that it's nuanced, and I think that it's ridiculous to give industry a total pass, and I think it's ridiculous to completely shut down industry. And but I love the comment from Alberta Ganger, and I love the debate around it, and I think it's important. Yeah,
and a funny one too, like even more nuanced with that bear pipeline thing, is bears love exposed, disturbed landscapes because that's where you get green grass growing, and bears are truly like they're mostly grizzly bears and black bears are mostly omnivorous. It's the polar bears that are mostly meat diet based. And so with those pipelines and clearings, I'm not saying they're necessarily a good thing. This is just a gray area, but you get that fresh vegetation coming up. You get those dandelions. And like, what did I do mostly at my fire tower? I watched bears eating dandelions, and all that, because there was a clearing around my tower. And so they were coming there to graze on early green up. And bears love, they're just like us. They love linear features because linear features are easier to walk along and they conserve a lot of energy versus trails. So again, I'm not necessarily advocating for pipelines. That's not it. It's just that there's all these gray areas that enter into the ways that bears fit into, our impact on the landscape. And then there's other species that don't like those linear features. So I'm not advocating for them. I'm just saying, there's all these, there's this, it's such a nuanced conversation.
Maybe we just need to rebrand the National Energy Corridor as a National Wildlife Transport Corridor.
Yeah.
and then we'll just get everybody on board.
Fair highway.
Listening to you talk, I'm like, how many dandelions and berries does a 600-pound grizzly have to eat to sustain itself? It's wild.
It's crazy. It's crazy. And they're just basically like, the Lookouts would joke that they're basically just like fur cows or something like that. It's like they're basically just big cows, but that they're different from cows because they're not a ruminant species. They don't have a 4-chambered stomach. They just have a single-chambered stomach. So it actually makes them really inefficient, have inefficient digestive systems, which is why they overcompensate by like literally eating night and day.
Yeah.
So anyways, all these nerdy facts about bears.
So cool. Nerd out, my friend.
Okay.
We use nerd as a compliment. Geeks and nerds are celebrities and heroes on this show. Serious congratulations on your book, Black Bear, A Story of Siblinghood and Survival. We've been talking to Trina Moyles. Her book is out today. You can read more about it at penguinrandomhouse.ca. Where can people find your book? And maybe, I know a lot of people are going to be interested in having a chance to get you to sign a book. They're going to want to hear you read from your book. What do people need to know? Are you going to be doing a cross-Canada tour?
Well, a little bit of a tour. I'm now Yukon Whitehorse based, so like traveling is a bit challenging, but I've got an event coming up on Wednesday at the at the Strathcona branch of the Edmonton Public Library at 7:00.
Okay.
With Connor Kerr, who's another amazing hometown local author hero and a good friend of mine. And then you can pretty much find the book anywhere. I always say try to support your local bookstores. Audrey's Porchlight Books is going to be teaming up with me for the event. Support local where you can. I know for folks in rural communities that's harder, but you can order the books online through those bookstores, or sometimes we do have to resort to Amazon way up in the north as well. So, no fault there as well.
Absolutely. Thanks for making time for us. Thank you for giving us the morning interview on the day of the book launch. That means a lot to us, and we've appreciated your perspective in past on all kinds of subjects, including wildfire and wildlife, and look forward to your next time here in our studio.
Yeah, thank you so much. This means a lot to me. I love this show. I love that your listeners are from literally all over and have all sorts of different views, and thanks for showing so much for a love for bears this morning.
Oh, I can't help myself. I'm obsessed with them. That's Trina Moyles in our feature interview presented by our friends at Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. Let us know what you think on this. To talk at RyanJesperson.com. You can leave a comment on the YouTube episode, or if you're listening to the show on Spotify, you can leave a comment there as well. We want to thank California Closets of Canada for making this episode of the show possible. This is a perfect time for you to get started with a free design consultation. If your goal this year is to get organized and decluttered, it starts with a conversation with a California Closets designer about the space, the budget, the vision. You can run them through your Pinterest board, and of course, understand more about these custom-built solutions. Everything they install is manufactured right here in our home province of Alberta and guaranteed for life. Whether it's an entryway in a mudroom, maybe it's a dream walk-in closet, or maybe it is an overhaul of the workhorse of your home, the garage. California Closets does it all and does it better than anyone else. You can request that free consultation today at californiaclosets.ca. It was checking out our friends UCAN Youth Services, their Instagram the other day. You can find them at UCAN Youth Services on Instagram, and I noticed a brand new video. I want you to check this out. If you were one of the real talkers that stuffed a stocking for UCAN over the break, or perhaps even, and we know that you're out there because the team at UCAN told us, maybe made a monthly commitment to continue to donate to this remarkable program that's helping young people out of harm's way and onto a path of economic independence. Well, this new video that they posted within the last week, well, it's UCAN grads talking about these ready-to-work programs that they've gone through. They've earned while they've learned, and now they are entering, or they are already in, the workforce. My friends, this is life-changing stuff. They're talking about the power of employment, the confidence that they've gleaned. We're just thrilled to be partners with UCAN Youth Services, and UCAN as well. Go ahead and give them a follow on Instagram at UCAN Youth Services, and you can always check out their website to learn more about the program. Maybe you know a young person aged 18 to 24 who just needs an opportunity, a door to walk through, right? They're on a path right now that maybe isn't leading them in the best direction, but you know that there's a ton of potential there. Again, those lives are turning around, starting with visits to ucan.ca. Our friends at Play Alberta reminding you that the next edition of Alberta Wins coming up here on Real Talk this Thursday. That's going to be 2 episodes from now on the 8th of January. These are stories of Albertans winning on the national or international stage in a bunch of different contexts. You know that Play Alberta winners are scoring every single day on the app or at playalberta.ca, including one winner that scored $160,000 on 2x3 Rush. From major casino winners every hour to jackpots worth millions, hundreds of popular games. And here's the detail I love most. Money that stays in the province. There's never been a better time to sign up for Play Alberta. You can download the app today to get started with casino, sports, and lottery all in one app. You got to be 18 or over to play. And if you do gamble, please use your game sense. And if you happen to like, this is a little shameless, but if you happen to like the blazer that I'm wearing on the show today, I'm happy to let you look at this thing. It's like, Johnny, it's like that blend you get between a formal jacket and a comfy sweater. This blazer just rides the line. It just hits the mark. The moment that I saw it at the Helm, I knew that I had to have it. Now, we always encourage you to visit our friends at the Helm in their beautiful downtown Edmonton location. It's a 3-story retail experience. But if you're out of Edmonton or unable to attend in person, Johnny's showing that store right now. When I say retail experience, I mean it. Like, it's absolutely stunning. They have their winter collection out. They're going to have their spring collection soon. The biggest service that I think they offer. Their team gets to know you. They understand the types of events you're at, how you wear your clothing, what you feel best in, and they can put those outfits together for you. I mean, this is, in many circumstances, this is luxury casual or complete custom wear. That's what the Helm does best. If you're not able to join them in store, make sure you check out their website at thehelmclothing.com. They've got a great lineup of winter accessories, including scarves, beanies, sunglasses, beautiful stuff. Don't forget, when you shop at thehelmclothing.com, the promo code REALTALK, all one word, will knock 10% off your entire order. That's REALTALK, all one word, your promo code to save 10% at thehelmclothing.com. Man, the bear stories, and I was loving this, folks sharing their perspectives on just wildlife encounters and the like, prompted by Trina Moyles in this beautiful book. I have to tell you, just as a host and as an interviewer, it's such a luxury and such a treat when an interview just kind of keeps going. I think it was Lauren I saw in the live chat. Somebody said, I love the relaxed feel of this interview when you're connecting with somebody that is so passionate about what they do or what they've observed or in Trina's case, what they're writing about, and they're just happy to talk about it, to have an audience that's with us and continuing to contribute as well. It's just, these are shows that end up in many cases being some of our absolute favorites. Have you ever, in your experience, have you seen a bear like in the wild? That would include, like, have you seen a bear on the side of the road? Have you ever had what might count as a bear encounter?
Sure, yeah. I saw bears when I was up in Fernie, mostly when I was snowboarding, right?
Yeah.
And they're in the backcountry, and they're kind of like, hey, this is, get back to the groomed trails. This is our kind of area, right? Yeah. But the safe thing about snowboarding is you're usually making a lot of noise. You're ripping down the hill. There's scrape sounds. There's, bustling of snow. You're usually, woo, you know what I mean? And someone said it in the chat. That's a big thing when you're out. If you are afraid of bears, like, we know, like, a bell isn't like a, foolproof plan for a bear to just ring a bell and you'll be saved. But making noise for most animals will, if they're in the vicinity, they tend to start moving away, right? Unless it's like a mountain lion or something, they probably move closer. But like with bears, it's just sad because you want to, like you said, you want to get close to them, you want to experience them, but at the same time, very dangerous, right? So, like,
oh yeah,
trying to share the same environment with these incredible creatures is kind of like, are we even supposed to? You know what I mean? Like, is it even, like, I'll just view it from a drone, I think, or something.
Yeah.
Or from a tower, like Trina, right?
Yeah. What, I mean, can you imagine? Could you see yourself doing a job like these fire tower?
I was looking at it, and I was like, she basically lives up there,
Oh, you do.
So it's like, it's camping in a tower.
She would be, for months at a time, and she's written about it. You can check it out. Trina's written a whole bunch of books, so we should give her more of a plug on some of the other books that she's written. But Women Who Dig, Farming, Feminism, and the Fight to Feed the World. The book that we talked to her about in past, Lookout, Love, Solitude, and Searching for Wildfire in the Boreal Forest, which is cool. She's also written for Canadian Geographic, the Globe and Mail, the Narwhal, et cetera, et cetera. Part of me is like, I think, and some people may chuckle at this if you know me at all, or if you can just draw your own conclusions by my career of choice. But I'm not sure that I could be like alone all the time. You know what I mean? I might need someone to talk to, someone to bounce ideas off. Now, that could be a dog, or it could be the other animals you might get to know. Yeah. I think as a writer, Trina probably found just an incredible inspiration out there, obviously, with the culmination leading to the release today of this new book and that sort of a thing. But it would be a life of real isolation. I think like maybe the old school version of it. I'm embarrassed to admit I don't even know if this is still a job. It's got to be still a job. But the lighthouse.
But
the lighthouse operators as well.
Well, no, just a lot of nature, like people who go out and like document nature or animals or work for National Geographic. They seem to be those kind of like not like loner types, but like they enjoy silence and a bit of isolation for a while. And, like bird watchers and stuff like that, you always think of them as like quiet, calm. But to be isolated up in that tower and obviously, you're talking to people, their walkie-talkie, cell phone, whatever, you're up in a tower. But just to kind of be alone and to wait to discover these animals for a long time. I'm not sure I have the patience for that, so I have a lot of respect for Trina and people like them.
Yeah, I saw, by the way, I'm doing a quick fact check here to make sure that we can serve this audience properly. And it turns out that lighthouse operator jobs do still exist.
Oh, God.
But they are very rare. Says that most of them are automated now. And she kind of said the same thing. We've learned about, obviously through the really unfortunate reality of the Jasper wildfire. And there's been a lot of talk on this show and on most talk shows over the past number of years. And of course, Lytton, BC and Slave Lake and Fort McMurray and all the other fires, Kelowna. About kind of the future of wildfire monitoring and our emergency preparedness and the like, and they're using so much more technology now, infrared scanning and drones and AI and the like, that those fire tower lookout jobs may not still exist. Same deal with the lighthouse operator, but I saw here, who was it? I think it was it Cactus Sheriff that said, was it months alone in a fire tower? Sign me the hell up. Like, I think that would really appeal to a lot of people, which would be really cool.
Yeah, it's weird. I guess there's a line, because for me, like, I like to be alone. Like this Sunday, I was like, I'm just gonna like not answer my phone, stay in a room, watch TV, whatever. But when you're talking about weeks, months, there's no TV. I'm sure you can watch your phone or whatever, but you're monitoring nature, right?
Yeah, you're supposed to be watching.
And it's not like you go up there and it's like there's a zoo around you. You have to wait. You have to be aware. You have to catch these moments that happen in a split second.
Yeah.
Get the right photo, the video, or the information when you're writing a book. And I'm just not sure I have the patience for that. I'm not going to give myself that much credit. And that's why these jobs are so fascinating.
You'd have to take up like crocheting or something, or some sort of like really, you could become the world's best solitaire player.
I'd come back I'd be ripped because I'd just be doing push-ups and sit-ups the whole time because I'm like a fidgeter, right? I'd have
well, that's what you say.
I'd have to be moving, you know what I mean? I can't just look through binoculars.
Well, see, this is how we're wired differently, is because you're going to be doing push-ups and sit-ups the whole time, and I'm going to be realizing that nobody's going to see me, so I'm not going to do a single push-up. No one's going to see me if I put on 30 pounds.
Well, if a bear comes, you'll get some exercise.
Yeah, that's right.
You'll be
that's
running.
right. I knew that we were going to love that conversation with Trina. I just love the vibe that she brings to the table, and also obviously the passion. She's talking about serious stuff too, right? Like her brother's death by suicide, I should say. I appreciate her touching on that. She talks about addiction. She talks about industry. Like, this really is if you listen to this show a lot, you know that we'll talk to a lot of authors, but I can't think of the last time that I've implored you to pick up a book. So that's Black Bear by Trina Moyles. As we wrap this episode, Real Talkers, we just want to thank you for being a part of it. I do want to remind you as we wrap that registration is open right now for the Real Talk Pond Hockey Classic. It's Saturday, the 31st of January, out in beautiful St. Albert. Go to ryanjesperson.com, click on the events link to register your team. We're also looking for volunteers. Thanks for the emails, Noob and Goose and others. Carly's going to be out there photographing. Johnny's going to be spinning. And we could use a couple more sponsors as well, all for a great cause. We'll talk to you again in 22 hours.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lauren Sterlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton, member emerita Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.